Let's all toast to the daughter who finally found a man desperate enough to put up with her. My father's voice rang through the reception hall, loud and proud, as if humiliating me was part of the entertainment. People laughed, some awkwardly, some eagerly, while the shame hit me like a punch to the stomach. Before I could even process the sting, my fiancé, Cormac, quietly pushed his chair back. He didn't shout, didn't argue. He simply walked to the AV table, plugged in a small flash drive, and said into the microphone, "Actually, let's toast to the truth." I didn't know it then, but what he was about to play would destroy my father's empire in 4 minutes. It would send my mother out of the venue in tears, make my father's biggest investor cut ties instantly, and force my brother, Alistair's golden child, to finally face who our father really was. To understand why Cormac did what he did, you need to know the Thorns. My father, Alistair Thorne, is a powerful real estate mogul in Denver. The kind of man who loves control more than he loves people. Growing up in his world meant everything was about image. There were only 2 roles in our family, the chosen heir and the child who didn't matter. My brother Sterling was the heir. I was the invisible one, expected to behave, smile, and never ask for anything. I learned my place early. When I graduated summa cum laude from UCLA, he didn't bother to show up. He claimed he had an important dinner with a client. Later I discovered he had actually spent the night playing poker. Yet when Sterling got accepted into business school, my father threw a huge party with gourmet catering and a string quartet. But the worst betrayal came wrapped in money. All my life, I'd heard whispers that my Nana left me a college fund. So when I graduated with $48,000 in student loans, I finally gathered the courage to ask about it. My father waved me off. That was absorbed into family assets. Don't be selfish, Anya. I swallowed the hurt. I always did. Then I met Cormac. He saw through everything, every joke, every slight, every time my father used me as a prop. After one particularly cruel comment from my father, Cormac asked me quietly, "Does that feel normal to you?" No one had ever asked me that. No one had ever cared enough to. Cormac didn't just love me. He studied the pattern. He gathered information. He watched the way my father controlled everything, including the wedding. My small dream ceremony turned into an extravagant event that reflected my father, not me. Every choice I made was replaced with his. My money, my decisions, he repeated with pride. Cormac understood something long before I did. My father would give himself the rope. All we had to do was let him. And on our wedding day, he did. After Cormac proposed, my father acted as if he was doing us a great favor. He said, "The wedding is my department. Consider it my gift to you." At first it sounded generous, but very quickly I understood it was not a gift at all. It was a way to take control. I had dreamed of a small and peaceful ceremony in the mountains, something simple and meaningful. But my dream didn't matter. My father booked the Blackstone estate, one of the most expensive venues in the state, without asking me. He paid $55,000 as if it was nothing, and he expected everyone to be impressed. I had made a small guest list of 80 people, family, friends, people who knew me. My father tripled it. Suddenly we had 220 guests, most of them strangers. They were his business partners, investors, political contacts, and people who only cared about networking. I felt like I was being pushed out of my own wedding. Everywhere I looked, I saw people celebrating him, not us. Every personal detail I tried to include was shot down immediately. I wanted a folk band. He wanted a classical orchestra. I wanted wildflowers. He wanted imported roses. Every time I spoke up, he reminded me, "My money, my decisions, Anya." It didn't matter that it was my wedding day. It didn't matter what I loved. He wanted a show, and I was simply part of the decoration. The whole event became a stage for my father to display his power and wealth. It was no longer about love or commitment. It was about him shining in front of his audience. I felt myself slipping into the version of me he always preferred. Quiet, agreeable, easy to control. It was like being a mannequin, dressed up and placed exactly where he wanted me. But Cormac saw everything. He watched the way my father made decisions without asking. He noticed how I would go silent, how my shoulders tensed, how I pretended everything was fine. Whenever my father wasn't looking, Cormac would squeeze my hand or give me a calm, steady look. Sometimes he would whisper, "Give him all the spotlight he wants." I didn't understand what he meant then. I thought he was simply trying to comfort me. I didn't know he was watching my father even more closely than I was. I didn't know that every controlling move my father made only strengthened the plan Cormac had quietly built. I didn't know that the wedding my father was designing so proudly would become the very place where his own mask would fall. While my father prepared his perfect show, Cormac was waiting for the perfect moment. I just didn't see it yet. 2 months before the wedding, something unexpected happened. My Aunt Jacinda, my mother's quiet and distant sister, reached out to Cormac. She rarely spoke to anyone in the family, so her message alone felt strange. She told him she was trying to sort through the last pieces of my grandparents' estate and was feeling lost with all the paperwork. Since Cormac was good with legal documents, she asked if he could help her understand some things. Cormac agreed, not thinking it would lead to anything significant. But while going through the old files, he noticed a strange entry in an old ledger from 2014. It mentioned a withdrawal of $48,000 from something called the Anya Thorne Educational Trust. My heart dropped when he told me the name. I had heard rumors for years that my Nana had left money for my education, but I never saw any of it. Instead, I graduated with huge student loans. Seeing that trust fund listed right there in black and white made my chest tighten. What shocked Cormac even more was where the money went. It had been moved into an account labeled A. Thorne Capital Reserve. It wasn't an accident, and it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a clear transfer straight into my father's personal business account. Cormac called Aunt Jacinda immediately. When she picked up, her voice shook. She already knew who had taken the money. She had known for years, but stayed silent. She explained that when she confronted my father long ago, he threatened her. He said that if she ever dared tell me, he would claim my mother was mentally unstable and have her committed. She admitted she had been terrified of him and stayed quiet to protect her sister. Hearing that made something inside me crack. All my life, I tried to convince myself that my father's behavior was just harsh jokes or strict parenting. But this was different. This wasn't a comment or a look or a forgotten ceremony. This was stealing my future and threatening my family into silence. It wasn't a mistake, it was deliberate cruelty. Cormac saved the document immediately. He printed copies, scanned them, and backed them up. He told me gently, "This is real proof." For the first time, I understood just how far my father had gone to keep control. It wasn't just about pride or power anymore. It was about using anything and anyone, even his own daughter, to make himself look stronger. This discovery changed everything. It wasn't just hurt feelings or unfair treatment. It was theft. It was manipulation. And it was the first piece of solid evidence that showed who my father truly was. After finding proof about the stolen trust, Cormac felt there was more beneath the surface. My father had always acted powerful and untouchable, and now that one secret was exposed, Cormac suspected it wasn't the only one. He started digging quietly, checking public records, old company documents, and anything that might show a pattern. He didn't tell many people what he was doing. He didn't want anyone warning my father. During his search, one name kept appearing, Lena Shaw. She had been an administrative director at my father's company years ago, but she had resigned suddenly. There were no clear reasons in the records, just hints of internal conflict that seemed to disappear without explanation. Soon after she left the company, Cormac found paperwork showing she went through a painful divorce. The timing felt connected. Cormac decided to reach out to her, but he did it carefully. He didn't want to scare her or put her at risk. He arranged a meeting under an anonymous introduction, hoping she would agree. To his surprise, she did. When they met, she looked tired but strong, like someone who had lived through something heavy. Over a cup of tea, she finally told her story. She explained that she had been in a relationship with my father for 5 years. He had told her he was unhappy at home and promised he would leave my mother. He painted himself as a victim in his own marriage, pretending he needed her to feel alive again. She believed him, and she built her life around those promises. But when her husband found out and everything fell apart, my father suddenly acted like he didn't know her beyond professional work. He denied the relationship completely. He made her look unstable at work, questioned her performance, and pushed quietly for her removal. Her job slipped away. Her marriage ended. Her reputation was damaged. And my father walked away untouched. She told Cormac she had kept all the messages and emails, proof that he had lied, manipulated, and used her. Some messages were sent during important moments in my family life, holidays, birthdays, even school events. It was clear he had lived a double life for years. Her voice didn't shake as she spoke. It was flat, almost empty. She told Cormac that my father had burned down her life and then behaved as though he had never been near the fire. Those were her words, and they stayed with me. When Cormac asked if she would allow him to use the evidence, she agreed without hesitation. She only had one condition: that her identity remain hidden. She said the truth mattered more than anything now. She wanted people to see who my father truly was, behind the perfect image he always showed the world. For weeks before the wedding, everything finally came together in a way I could no longer ignore. Cormac asked me to sit with him in the living room, and when I walked in, I saw papers spread out across the carpet. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at, but then he began to explain each piece, one by one, with a calm voice that somehow made the truth feel even heavier. He showed me the ledger from the trust fund, the one that proved my father had taken the money meant for my education. He showed me the messages from Lena, carefully edited to hide her identity, but still clear enough to show what had happened. Then he showed me a timeline he had created, with dates, patterns, and quiet betrayals marked in simple lines and notes. It was like seeing my father's real face for the first time. I had always known he could be cruel with his words. I had known he liked control, but I had never allowed myself to believe he was capable of taking so much from other people. Years of peace, trust, and dignity. Looking at that timeline felt like watching a mask peel off, piece by piece, until all that was left was someone I didn't recognize anymore. It hit me then that this wasn't just about the money he took from me. It wasn't just about the way he treated me as the child who didn't matter. It was about my mother, who had spent decades trying to be the perfect wife without knowing she was living with a man who lied to her easily. It was about Lena, who had lost almost everything because she trusted him. It was about anyone who had crossed his path, believing the kind smile he used in public. As I stood there, staring at the papers, I felt something shift inside me. For years, I had learned to stay quiet. I had learned to take the blame, to smooth the edges, to make myself small so he wouldn't get angry. That silence had become a habit, one I didn't even notice anymore. But at that moment, it felt like a frozen layer inside me finally cracked. Not all at once, just a slow, steady break that made space for something new. Cormac knelt beside me and asked softly, "What do you want to do?" His question wasn't pushy. It wasn't angry. It was patient, like he already knew what I would say, but wanted me to find the words myself. I took a long breath. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. It surprised me how steady it sounded. "I want him to know that I see who he really is," I said. "And I want everyone else to see it too." Cormac nodded, not in excitement, but in understanding. And in that quiet moment, I realized something important. This wasn't revenge. It was truth. And I was finally ready to stop protecting the man who had never protected me. Cormac and I spent the night quietly planning what to do. We both knew my father loved attention, and we couldn't predict what he might say or do at the wedding. So we agreed on one thing: if he tried to embarrass me again, we would not stay silent. Cormac gathered every piece of evidence we had. He organized the financial documents, the messages, and the recordings into one clear, short video, just 4 minutes long. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was simple, direct, and impossible to deny. Aunt Jacinda agreed to record a calm, steady voiceover explaining what each file meant. Her voice made everything sound even more real and honest. Cormac put everything into a small flash drive. It looked normal, nothing special, but we both knew how powerful it was. He slipped it into the inner pocket of his suit and tapped it once. "If he uses the mic to hurt you," Cormac said softly, "we use the screen to tell the truth." His voice was steady, but I could see worry in his eyes. He didn't want revenge. He wanted fairness. He wanted me to stop being the family punching bag. We promised each other that we would not use the flash drive unless absolutely necessary. If my father behaved, if he let the wedding be peaceful, we would keep everything private and deal with it later, after our honeymoon. But if he crossed the line again, if he tried to shame me in front of everyone, then the truth would speak for itself. The next morning, we dressed as if it were any normal wedding day. I let the makeup artist work on my face. Cormac straightened his tie. We both smiled for the photographers, greeted relatives, and walked through the decorated hall like everything was perfect. But under all of it, we carried the plan silently between us. No one around us knew. Not the guests, not the wedding planners, not even my mother. To them, we were just another happy couple preparing for our big moment. But inside, I felt the weight of years of humiliation and fear slowly lifting. I wasn't helpless anymore. And as Cormac took my hand before we stepped into the reception hall, I knew one thing for sure. No matter what happened, I would no longer let my father control my story. Cormac knew we couldn't face my father alone, not with the way he controlled people and twisted every situation. So before the wedding events began, he stepped away to make two important calls. They were quiet, private, and carefully encrypted so nothing could be traced or intercepted. He wanted everything to be safe and done with full consent. The first call was to Lena Shaw. She had been scared before, unsure if she wanted to be involved, but now her voice sounded steady. When Cormac asked her one last time if she still agreed to let her part be included, she didn't hesitate. "He needs to be held to the light," she said. There was strength in her tone, the kind that comes from someone who has been silent for too long. Hearing her so sure made me feel a deep sense of respect for her. She wasn't just helping me, she was also standing up for herself. The second call was to my Aunt Jacinda. She had always been the quiet one in the family, the person who tried to keep peace by blending into the background. Cormac warned her that things might get messy if the truth came out at the wedding. There was a short pause, and then her answer came back firm. "I've been a ghost in my own family, afraid of his shadow. It's time." Her words surprised me. I had never heard her speak with that much fire. It was like she had finally decided she was done hiding. When they finished speaking with Cormac, both Lena and Aunt Jacinda asked to talk to me for a moment. I expected them to sound nervous, but their voices were steady. They thanked me for letting them be part of the decision, and I thanked them for their bravery. Without them, the truth would have felt too heavy to carry. Something shifted inside me after those calls. I had spent my whole life feeling small around my father, like I was trapped under his shadow. I thought it was only my battle, only my pain. But hearing their voices, strong, clear, and ready to stand with me, made everything feel different. I was no longer that scared daughter trying to survive his insults alone. We had become a team, a quiet alliance moving behind the scenes. Each of us had our own reasons, our own wounds, but we were united now. Their support didn't erase the fear completely, but it gave me something stronger to hold on to. The belief that I wasn't isolated anymore. For the first time, facing him didn't feel impossible. It felt necessary. And with them beside me, even from the shadows, I felt ready. September 21st arrived with a calm, bright sky stretching over the Blackstone estate. The grounds looked perfect, almost unreal, but inside I felt anything but calm. My hands shook as I got ready. The fear wasn't about marrying Cormac. I trusted him completely. It was about what might happen once my father picked up that microphone. Everything depended on how far he would go. Before we walked out, Cormac came to me and placed a soft kiss on my forehead. His hand brushed the pocket of his suit, the place where the small flash drive rested. That tiny object held the truth that could destroy everything my father had built. "Whatever happens, we leave here as partners," he whispered. His voice steady. Certain. It helped my breathing slow a little. The ceremony itself felt like watching my own life from far away. I repeated my vows, held Cormac's hands, and smiled for the photos, but it all moved like a dream. Guests filled the rows, most of them my father's business connections. They greeted him with back pats, admiration, and fake respect. When he walked me down the aisle, he smiled wide for the cameras, acting like a proud father. But behind the smile, I could feel his usual tight grip, the one that always reminded me he owned the moment. When the ceremony ended and we moved into the reception hall, everything sparkled. Crystal glasses, white flowers, golden lights. It looked beautiful, but the air felt heavy to me. Every laugh felt forced, every compliment rehearsed. I kept glancing at the stage where the microphone stood, knowing he wouldn't be able to resist using it. The toasts began. Sterling, one of my father's trusted employees, went first. His speech was safe and dull, clearly something he had practiced word for word. People clapped politely. I barely heard any of it. Then my father rose from his seat and stepped forward with the confidence of someone who believed the world existed for him alone. He took the microphone, chest pushed out, shoulders squared, eyes sweeping across the room like he was preparing to deliver a performance. He looked pleased, too pleased, ready to turn the moment into his own spotlight. I felt my stomach twist, knowing this was the moment everything might change. The flash drive stayed in Cormac's pocket like a silent warning. And I stood there waiting, hoping my father wouldn't cross the line, but knowing he probably would. He started with small, safe jokes about Sterling, the kind people laugh at even when they don't really find them funny. The room chuckled politely, and I tried to breathe normally. But then his eyes landed on me, and everything inside me tightened. I knew that look. It was the same one he used whenever he wanted to remind me who held the power. "That brings me to my Anya," he said, stretching my name like it belonged to him. His voice sounded warm, but everyone who grew up under him knew that tone was a trap. He paused just long enough for the room to focus entirely on us. Then he smiled, a sharp, wolf-like smile that made my stomach twist. "We honestly didn't think this day would come," he continued. "She's always been so particular." People around the tables shifted uncomfortably, but he kept going. "So let's raise our glasses to the daughter who finally found a man desperate enough to put up with her." The laughter that followed was thin and hesitant, but it still cut through me. It felt like a knife slipping under my skin. My cheeks burned, my throat closed, and the world blurred for a second. This wasn't a joke. This was humiliation. Public, deliberate, and cruel, exactly the way he liked it. I turned my head toward Cormac. He didn't look angry. He didn't flinch. He simply met my eyes with a calm that felt powerful, and I knew instantly. This was the moment. This was the line my father had just crossed. Without a single word spoken between us, Cormac rose from his chair. His movements were slow, steady, almost peaceful. People watched him, thinking he was going to make a sweet toast to defend me. But he didn't go to the stage. He walked to the AV booth at the side of the room. My father kept talking, unaware. Someone even tried to joke along with him. But then the romantic slideshow behind us suddenly went dark. Gasps rippled through the tables. Cormac slid the flash drive into the computer with the care of someone placing an important key into a lock. A second later, the big screen lit up again, but not with pictures of our engagement. In bold white letters, against a black background, the words appeared. A toast to the real Alastair Thorne. Every sound in the room died. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. People froze. My father's smile vanished. And I felt something inside me shift, like air finally entering a room that had been locked for years. For over 4 minutes, the room stayed completely silent. Only the sound of slides clicking and Aunt Jacinda's calm narration filled the air. One by one, the evidence appeared on the screen. The ledger showing the stolen $48,000, the proof of my education being taken from me, and the messages to another woman with dates and times clearly visible. Every detail was undeniable. The final slide had a single line from Lena. "He is a man who builds his mansion on other people's ruins." Then the screen went black, leaving the room in stunned, heavy quiet. The silence broke first with my mother. Her chair scraped loudly across the floor as she stood, her face wet with tears, yet hard and unyielding from years of forced composure. She didn't speak. She just left, walking out of the room with a weight that made every eye turn to her absence. The sound of her departure echoed more than words ever could. Then came my father's investor, Mr. Vogel. He stood abruptly, pointing a trembling finger straight at my father. "You're finished," he said, his voice shaking with anger and disbelief, and stormed out before anyone could react. The authority and respect my father had carefully built over decades crumbled in front of him in seconds. Sterling, my brother, remained frozen. He had always looked up to my father, idolized him even, but now he could no longer hide the truth. His expression was one of complete shock, his eyes wide as the reality of our father's actions hit him. The pride and admiration he once felt had vanished in an instant. And my father, Alastair Thorne, stood at the head table, pale, frozen, the microphone dangling uselessly from his hand. He couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't command anyone's attention anymore. All his control, all his power, evaporated in the quiet aftermath of truth. Cormac stepped forward then, taking my hand. His presence was steady, grounding me after the storm that had erupted. He walked me to the center of the dance floor, picked up the microphone, and addressed the room with calm authority. "Now," he said, his voice clear and confident, "the real celebration can begin. For those who came for us, thank you. The bar is open." His words were simple, but they carried weight. They marked a turning point, a shift from shame to freedom, from fear to justice. That night, we didn't have a perfect wedding. There was no traditional ceremony or forced smiles. But we had something far more important, truth and justice. As we drove away, leaving the chaos behind, I felt it deeply. I wasn't leaving just a wedding venue behind. I was leaving a lifetime of shadows, walking into a future that Cormac and I had built together, hand in hand, finally free.